Let's take a moment to remember the 8th generation of consoles. When they were released in 2013, Sony managed to blow Microsoft's Xbox One out of the water in terms of sales. If you remember, Microsoft had the audacity to prioritize digital sales for their console. There was also this draconian lending system for physical games, because tech companies hate that their customers actually own what they buy. It was no good. But the ironic thing is, roughly 90% of media is now digital a little over a decade later. Unfortunately, when it comes to people engrossed in modern-day pop culture, we all scream and complain on social media about undeniably valid points. But when it comes time to do something about it, the hefty majority of us still buy the stupid thing we were all bitching about, or spend way too long talking about a project until inevitably it manages to get a sequel or an additional season, just because of hate watching. I acknowledge the irony of someone with the hobby of reviewing media on the internet having this opinion. I never said I wasn't a hypocrite.
I know who I am now.
Back to the topic at hand, another contributing factor to the Xbox One's sluggish early sales was the launch lineup of exclusive titles, which was lackluster. That complaint could have been made about both consoles at the time, but Microsoft didn't cast a wide net by choosing not to launch with a Halo title or a comparable shooter. Dead Rising 3 was the only thing I remember stirring up any hype for the Xbox. When I was gearing up to play it for this video, I started to remember a simpler time. It was a time before digital-only systems. Before society migrated entirely to the chronic condition of being online. Yes, it was a time before I knew how many people had herpes. I'm not joking about that, by the way. Look that shit up. 67% of the world's population. HSV is not on standard STD panels. Most positive cases are asymptomatic. Dude, I might have herpes as we speak. And I don't even know. I'm scheduling a test, and you should too. It's been a blast working my way through this series. The first Dead Rising was the 3rd video I ever made, so I'm a little attached at this point. I've never played Dead Rising 3. It's going to be exciting to see how it stacks up. Is it a classic like the first 2 games? Is it at least good? Who's to say? Oh, I guess I'm supposed to say. Start the review.
Initiated by the turning of an illegally infected, unchipped person. Let this tragedy be a reminder to all Americans. Zombrex chipping is the law.
The previous Dead Rising games have always been extremely tongue-in-cheek with their narrative, while having a dark subplot related to eccentric weirdos using zombie outbreaks for personal or ideological gain. These themes largely remain in Dead Rising 3. Playing this game in 2025 is surprisingly surreal, because you hear a lot of unsettling words and narratives that are currently being echoed in real-world modern America.
You think art's gonna save the world? Ain't that nice?
It's not for me, it's for people like me, the ones who live off the grid because of those fascists.
It feels like this game was made, today. Like, fascism's getting thrown around, illegals. Swear to God, if RFK is in charge in this world, too. I've never seen roadkill that didn't look delicious.
The story as a whole does lean into the darker subplot. In DR3, the government is trying to force infected people who haven't turned into getting this automated chip to treat their symptoms as opposed to the drug Zombrex that was introduced in the last game. The installation of this chip comes with many unsavory implications that are explored as the story progresses, which was a good direction for the developers to take. The problem is, the game's characters and the world are not very entertaining. Let's take a moment to talk about the main character. Nick is a young man trying to navigate this zombie outbreak that has infected his sunny Southern California city. And at first glance, he appears to be a pretty zany guy. Within the first 5 minutes of being introduced to him, he's taken the nesty plunge off a highway.
Oh God! No, holy crap, man!
This guy looks like a go-getter. Someone that's going to be a blast to be around. He's not, though. Nick is one of the most boring characters I've ever had the displeasure of playing as in a video game. And I'm including silent protagonists in that assessment. Something special about him is revealed later in the story, but it's like seeing a souped-up Prius. Yeah, you put some 22s on it, and swapped out the electric motor with a 2.0 turbo, but come on, man. It's still a Prius. Plus, you fucked up the fuel economy and reliability. That metaphor can be applied to many parts of Dead Rising 3. The narrative took the biggest hit, though. My friend and I took roughly 10 hours to beat this game, and I had to rush to write this portion of the script afterward, because it's so forgettable. After that 10 hours, do you know the one thing that stuck out? The one thing I will remember for years to come when thinking about this game. It's this here.
Just walked in the door and already presenting.
Do you need to know anything else? Well, if you do, let's talk about the gameplay.
That's honestly adorable.
Okay, the gameplay has a lot more positives to talk about. Credit where credit is due. The team behind Dead Rising 3 refined every mechanic seen in the previous games. Stat buffs are now a choice players get to make, with a lot more options on offer for speccing your character than ever before. There's also more sophisticated crafting, with weapons and vehicles now being available. And the AI for the survivors that can be saved is now competent. You can even call them in to fight with you. But honestly, they didn't help me much. They aren't exactly experienced warriors, and the zombie hordes are so big now they often get lost in the mob.
I'm not forgetting you, Ravi. You're annoying as shit, so I'm leaving you. There's a difference.
Speaking of the horde mechanics, they are impressive even to this day. It is wild how many zombies fill the screen at one time. That was probably only doable because they locked the game at 30 frames, but that's a subject for a later discussion. Hordes are fun to chop through. They deserve praise. And the well-needed addition of craftable vehicles makes for a fleshed-out combat system. The driving isn't amazing by any means, but it's more than serviceable for this type of open-world game, and the same can be said for the combat as a whole. Shooting is tighter than before, with a generous aim assist and more finishing moves that can be done on zombies with melee weapons. Killing the undead is just more creative in Dead Rising, but I don't love that you have to find blueprints before you can craft a new combo weapon now. It's cool that you can craft them on the go instead of needing a tool bench, but in previous DR games, if you knew the combination you can make the weapon, with or without instruction. That isn't possible now, and it just made me feel perturbed. When it comes to the co-op, it's the best way to experience the game. It's often seamless too. Players share the majority of their PP.
It's like, yeah, my peepee's gonna get bigger. You hear that, Hayden? It's finally happening.
It's about time.
Which means there isn't much of a disparity in power levels between players if you start your playthrough together. I managed to stay about a level behind my friend, which made me feel good. I like it when it feels like I'm doing something. I'm a cool guy. I contribute.
Yeah, you do.
The sad thing is the player that isn't hosting still loses their inventory every time they drop from the game, which is something I wish they would have fixed. Also, if we're back to bitching, the game is way too easy. My friend and I died a collective of 3 times during our playthrough together, and even though the timed mechanics have made a return, there was no point where we felt rushed, or even a mild sense of urgency. And that was with us doing most of the side quests. But that wasn't for lack of trying on the part of the game, because after completing one of the many uninspired quests, the developers would love to put the following objective at the opposite end of the map from the thing you just accomplished. Nothing is better than walking across a decently sized map for 5 to 8 minutes just to get to Timbuktu. There is a nightmare difficulty that, from my understanding, adds that removed challenge back into the game, but regretfully, I didn't replay Dead Rising 3 to experience that mode. Because if you haven't guessed by now, I'm a bit lukewarm on the third entry in this series. Despite all the improvements made to this title, it can feel mediocre a good portion of the time. The best example of this is the Psychos. Before, they were challenging encounters, and often required the player to take different approaches for each of them. Now it pretty much comes down to cheesing the Psycho with the most powerful weapon you have on hand. Sometimes you don't even need that. Just head into the boss fight with a pep in your step.
And that can-do attitude, you can't forget that.
Can-do attitude.
I know it's disingenuous for me to harp on the difficulty so much when I didn't play the Nightmare mode, but I'm a busy guy. Work is stressful, and I probably have herpes. So I'm not going to dedicate more time to a game I find to be outrageously mid, for reasons I will continue to expand on in the presentation section.
Find sanctuary in peaceful garden.
Holy shit. Zombies get in, are you okay?
Sweet anger goes through us. It is how universe tell us who.
We've now reached the point in the video where I have to talk about what I liked the least in Dead Rising 3. What happened with the visuals for this game? Dead Rising 1 and 2 may have not been the most technically beautiful games, even for their day, but they had a vibrant, creative look to them that for some reason was discarded for the third outing of the series. Why is every color so muted? I've been to Southern California. It's not all smog. Some of it is, don't get me wrong. Smog is also sometimes the least of your worries, if you know what I'm saying. But most of it is pretty, bright, fun. Everything here looks gross. A gross aesthetic accompanies most of the character models and general visual ideas for the game. I'm going to bring up the Psychos again, because frankly they were done dirty. I preferred it when the devs would go with over-the-top personalities related to a profession, like the cook from DR2 or the clown from DR1. Instead they go for cheap jokes about personality and physical flaws. Things like a sex-crazed gimp or a gluttonous fat lady. There is one standout Psycho, but the rest have been reduced to a gimmick. This isn't a social justice conversation either. This is a laziness conversation. I don't find a character funny or interesting just because they're fat. I don't know, maybe I don't get it. It's called art, you simpleton.
Are you calling me?
Oh shit.
Circling back to that 30 frames a second comment I made in the gameplay section, yeah, running a 10-year-old game at 30 frames per second on current hardware is frustrating. You can go into the files and adjust some things to make it run higher, but I find that annoying on principle. I also believe the physics are tied to the frame rate in this game, so adjusting it would lead to the experience becoming unstable. I'm not typically a frame rate snob. I played on a 30 FPS 720p monitor well into the 60 FPS era, but I even found this annoying. Who likes motion blur? If anyone comments on this video, I like motion blur. Find Jesus. I don't even care if Jesus is real or not. You need to find him.
Praise Jesus, Joy! Always and forever, Muggles.
At least they kept the ability to have custom clothing in the cutscenes. It would have been a tragedy otherwise. You look me in the eyes and tell me you wouldn't want to see this in a cutscene.
You fucker. You goddamn son of a bitch.
Now that would be art. The sound mixing wasn't done well either. The sound issues may have been something specific with my builder headset, so take these comments with a grain of salt, but even with my sound settings being maxed out, I had trouble hearing dialogue from characters when playing. This is a shame because I could hear the environmental sound and music, and it was pretty good. Cutting up zombies sounds appropriately chunky, and the music has this synth horror vibe going on. I was fucking with it. You know, talking about some positives inspired me. Let's talk about a few more good things. While I may not enjoy a lot of the visuals, I will say the scope of the world is grand, and the third-person camera is more cinematic than before, allowing the player to capture the scope of things that are happening around them in a more exciting way. I also love the improvements made to the animations. They're creative, and whoever worked on them, don't think your work went unnoticed. There are also some admittedly funny things you can find in the world. Finding the collectibles was entertaining. I enjoyed the Frank statues most of all. It wouldn't feel like a Dead Rising game without some reference to the man who covered wars. When the game embraces its quirky roots, that's when the player has the opportunity to have fun. With that said, nostalgia, quirky energy, and overall fun is just lacking in DR3. If I didn't have my friend to act stupid with, there's a good chance I would have been even harder on this game.
Hold up.
You're dead, girl, and get to the Zombrex already.
Lieutenant Kidney? Oh.
That's left kidney. I see the right kidney, but it appears the lieutenant kidney has been removed.
I don't think Dead Rising 3 is bad, but like I said before, it's mid. That should be the title. Mid Rising 3. It's ugly, too easy, and lacks the personality that made the series a cult classic. In my opinion, it doesn't hold up nowadays, and I'm guessing it didn't live up to the hype it managed to garner leading up to its release alongside the 8th generation of consoles. Hell, I don't even think it lived up to my expectations as a Dead Rising fan, but that opinion seems to be a mixed bag in the DR community. And if you happen to have an opposing opinion from mine on Dead Rising 3, I'd love to hear about it in the comments. When I do my game reviews, I tend to pick games I either know I love already, or expect to love based on personal taste. I've never actually done a review for a game I didn't recommend. That is until now. Even if this game is not terrible, it's not a good use of your time. And to go even further, it's disappointing. I had never played Dead Rising 3. I was looking forward to it because I had so much fun playing the other 5 Dead Rising games. But here I was left wanting. You hate to see it. But hey, there is always Dead Rising 4. I've heard that one isn't good either. Who knows? I'm holding out hope. It's all we have at the end of the day. That's it for me. And as always, thank you for your time.